Back to another episode with ByrdAdatto. As we keep managing through this COVID-19 crisis, we want to kind of hit a pause button and remind everyone that if you are in the healthcare industry, you are subject to a lot of regulations. And of course, we're not going to cover them all in this short moment, but we definitely wanted to focus on certain areas like your anti-referral laws or your anti-kickback laws because they're still relevant today as they were before COVID-19. And Michael, we have our another guest today, so why don't you make the introduction?
Yes, this is a repeat offender for these episodes. Our partner, Jay Reyero, who we won't ask you about your haircut that you've managed to get during this closure of all salons, but it looks nice.
All credit to my wife.
So Jay, as we've mentioned before, he helps a lot with our heavy regulatory healthcare related stuff and can give you, the audience, an update on what's going on.
On March 30th, the Secretary of Health and Human Services announced the creation of several blanket waivers under Stark, which is the federal law's prohibition on physician self-referrals. And with the creation of those blanket waivers, it allowed for the waiver of sanctions related to only those financial relationships and referrals that related solely to COVID-19 purposes. And that is a defined term and gives a list of what those are. Some of them are broadly defined and broadly interpreted. And so that was under the Stark. And then a few days later, OIG came out and announced that it was going to not impose administrative sanctions, so basically enforcement discretion, on those arrangements or those acts that are protected under the blanket waivers for Stark. There was some concern that if you were protected under the blanket waivers of Stark, you weren't necessarily protected under the federal Anti-Kickback Law. And so the OIG wanted to create some simplicity and simply say you don't need to do a secondary analysis so long as you're protected by the blanket waivers for Stark. We will not enforce any discretion on the kickback. So it gave a little bit more guidance as far as how the interplay of those two laws work. The nuances that we are still kind of looking at and some clients may run into is the Stark blanket waivers were retroactive back to March 1st, whereas the anti-kickbacks were effective in the beginning of April. So there's kind of that weird lag there where it's not really covered and we don't really have any guidance on how that was going to be handled. But at least moving forward, we know that they're both in lockstep.
And Jay, then this brings up the question that unfortunately you and I have been asked a few times in our lifetime. So does this mean now I can give legal kickbacks?
Well, you can never give legal kickbacks in any context, but especially in this case, for the OIG, they were very specific in their announcement that this would apply to any other arrangements not covered by the blanket waivers. So in your traditional arrangements that implicate anti-kickback, if it's not covered by the blanket waivers, this would have no effect. Also, in both announcements, there were some language included that allows for some discretion if they believe fraud and abuse are involved. So there is some discretion there. And then finally, you got to remember that all of this is related to the public health emergency that we're currently under. And so as soon as that goes away, waivers go away, the discretion goes away. So this is really just a very short-term period, and we don't really have any guidance on when these things go away, exactly how to unwind these relationships. So those are all, things that when you're dealing with this, if you can fall within the waiver and the discretion, you still kind of have to plan for the future when those may not necessarily be available once this health emergency is terminated.
Yeah, I mean, I would have three kind of practical things for the audience to take from this. First is that this is a sign of recognition of the fact that there's a pandemic going on and some leniency. You want to balance that with the second point, which is this is not a freedom to take advantage of the pandemic. And we've seen stuff in the news of, doctor in California who's been arrested for prescribing a COVID-19, basically kit that would, he allegedly claimed would cure people from COVID, and he's under indictment. And so This is not a freedom for the bad actors to take action, and then for our audience who are not the bad actors out there, this is temporary. And so if you listen to this and didn't know really what Jay was referencing when he was talking about kickbacks and Starks and where all this applies, really all it means, if you're getting into a healthcare arrangement, you need to call legal counsel anyway. This doesn't change that. It's so easily one little change in your arrangement can take you from legal to illegal, and this is not the kind of thing that you want to go on your own with.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And one thing we definitely know is the government has a long memory, and so that even if you're getting away with it right now, does not mean that they won't come back later and say, no, you're completely mistruth. You went against this waiver, or the waiver didn't go that far. So I agree with Michael in the sense of making sure that if you are going to go this route, make sure you do it correctly, even with these waivers which are temporary. But that's all the time we have again today. Jay, thanks for joining us again.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
And